In 1963, Ray Harryhausen flew to Los Angeles with a mission that sounds like science fiction itself. He met with NASA's public affairs officer Ben James to research rocket designs for a movie about Victorians landing on the moon. Not a documentary, not educational footage. A fantasy adventure based on an H.G. Wells novel written before airplanes existed. 7 months later, producer Charles Schneer did the same thing, sitting down with NASA officials to gather every scrap of information they could about lunar missions that hadn't happened yet. NASA shared blueprints, surface theories, and classified concepts about what a moon landing might look like. The irony is perfect. A fantasy film about 1890s explorers was being built using cutting-edge space race intelligence. And 5 years before Apollo 11, first men in the moon would give audiences their first glimpse of what landing on the lunar surface might actually feel like. The film flopped. Critics shrugged, but it predicted pieces of history before they happened. These are the strange truths behind the movie that became a time capsule. Number 1. Harryhausen met with NASA before anyone had seen the moon. In January 1963, Ray Harryhausen walked into NASA headquarters in Los Angeles and sat down with Ben James, the agency's public affairs officer. He wasn't there to pitch a documentary. He was researching a Victorian fantasy about a gravity-defying sphere. But NASA took him seriously. They showed him rocket designs, surface theories, and landing concepts that were still classified as experimental. Harryhausen absorbed everything, sketching notes and asking questions about dust plumes, terrain slopes, and how a spacecraft might actually descend. The footage he'd eventually create would look so accurate that NASA itself would later use clips from the film to help train astronauts and give TV audiences a visual reference for the Apollo missions. Fiction helped build the blueprint for reality. Number 2. The film's ending was stolen from another Wells novel. H.G. Wells's original 1901 novel has a bleak conclusion, but screenwriter Nigel Kneale decided to borrow the twist ending from Wells's earlier masterpiece, The War of the Worlds. In both stories, an advanced alien civilization is wiped out not by human weapons, but by disease. In First Men in the Moon, the Selenites die because Professor Cavor had a cold. The bacteria spread through their underground city, killing every last one. It's the same sardonic irony Wells used in 1898, repurposed for a lunar adventure. Kneale later admitted the film became a bit too farcical and lost some of Wells's philosophical weight. But that borrowed ending remained one of the sharpest moments in the movie. A reminder that even in fantasy, humanity's smallest flaws can destroy entire worlds. Number 3. 25 children spent 2 hours getting into latex selenite suits. Ray Harryhausen hated using actors in creature costumes. He'd built his entire career on stop-motion animation, creating creatures frame by frame with complete control over every movement. He called costumed actors a compromise that undermined the magic. But the script demanded swarms of selenite workers crawling through underground caverns, and animating hundreds of insect beings would have taken years. So Harryhausen designed 25 molded latex costumes with reinforced sections and hired children to wear them because their smaller frames matched the scale he needed. Each suit took 2 hours to put on. The kids had to stand perfectly still while crew members sealed them into bug-like shells with compound eyes, antennae, and spindly artificial limbs. The problem became obvious the moment filming started. The children's arms were too thick, their shoulders too broad, their movements too recognizably human. No matter how much Harryhausen adjusted the design or coached the kids to move differently, the suits never looked convincing. He relied on low-key lighting to hide the flaws, shooting the costume selenites in deep shadows and quick cuts. The technique worked well enough that casual viewers didn't notice, but Harryhausen knew. In his later writings, he admitted those scenes were the least successful effects work in his entire career, a necessary evil that still haunted him decades later. Number 4. The skeleton in the X-ray scene was recycled from Jason and the Argonauts. When the Selenites scan Kate Callender with their alien technology, the camera reveals her skeleton in stop motion. It's a brief, eerie moment, and the skeleton wasn't new. Harryhausen had used the exact same armature in Jason and the Argonauts just 1 year earlier. Instead of building a new model, he simply repurposed the one from his previous film, a practical decision that saved weeks of work. Most audiences never noticed. But for Harryhausen, it was one of the smartest shortcuts he ever took. Why waste time building something you've already perfected? Number 5. Lionel Jeffries had the kind of imagination Harryhausen rarely found. Most actors struggled to react to creatures that didn't exist yet. They'd stare at empty space, waiting for Harryhausen to explain what they were supposed to be seeing. But Lionel Jeffries was different. Harryhausen would show him rough sketches of the Selenites or the mooncalf, and Jeffries would instantly understand. He'd suggest camera angles, offer ideas for reactions, and play the scene as if the creature was already there. Harryhausen later said Jeffries was one of the rare actors who enjoyed the process instead of just tolerating it. The partnership worked so well that Jeffries essentially stole the movie. His manic, bumbling Professor Cavour became the heart of the film, even overshadowing Harryhausen's effects in some scenes. That's the mark of a perfect collaboration, when the actor trusts the animator enough to make the invisible feel real. Number 6. The UN astronauts wore real Royal Air Force pressure suits. The sleek spacesuits worn by the modern-day astronauts weren't Hollywood props. They were Windac high-altitude pressure suits developed for the Royal Air Force. Each one came equipped with a 1960s-style aqualung cylinder worn as a backpack. Columbia Pictures borrowed them to give the UN mission an authentic, cutting-edge look. The suits were uncomfortable, heavy, and difficult to move in, but they looked exactly like what people in 1964 imagined real space gear should be. It was another example of the film's strange blend of Victorian whimsy and Cold War realism. Fantasy explorers in diving suits next to modern astronauts in military-grade pressure gear, all sharing the same lunar surface. Number 7. Harryhausen almost abandoned this project for another Wells novel. After finishing Jason and the Argonauts in 1963, Harryhausen had his next film completely lined up. He wanted to adapt The Food of the Gods, another H.G. Wells story about giant creatures created by experimental science that gets out of control. He'd already started preliminary sketches. The project felt like a natural follow-up, monsters and mayhem in the Harryhausen tradition. But then he met Nigel Kneale at a party, and everything changed. Kneale pitched First Men in the Moon with such infectious enthusiasm that Harryhausen started reconsidering. The problem was Charles Schneer. The producer hated the idea. He worried the Victorian setting had no variety, no action potential. He feared audiences wouldn't buy a period piece when real space exploration had advanced so dramatically. Every time Harryhausen brought it up, Schneer would list the same logical arguments. The story felt too small, too old-fashioned, too literary for a visual effects spectacle. But Harryhausen kept pushing, arguing that the contrast between Victorian imagination and Cold War realism was exactly what made it compelling. Eventually, Schneer gave in, though he never fully embraced the project, and Harryhausen shelved The Food of the Gods indefinitely, diving instead into a lunar world that existed somewhere between eras, between fantasy and prediction. Number 8. Widescreen format nearly broke Harryhausen's process. First Men in the Moon is the only film in Harryhausen's career shot in anamorphic widescreen. Columbia Pictures demanded it. They wanted a grand cinematic spectacle to match the space race excitement sweeping theaters. But Harryhausen had never adapted his dynamation process for widescreen. The wider frame exposed everything. Matte lines became more visible. Miniature imperfections stood out. Every stop-motion creature had to be positioned with tighter precision because the compositions left no room for error. Harryhausen later admitted the format limited how much animation he could include. Some sequences he'd planned had to be simplified or scrapped entirely because widescreen made them too difficult to execute. It's why First Men in the Moon has less stop-motion than his other films. The format that was supposed to make the movie look bigger actually restricted what Harryhausen could do. Number 9. The mooncalf's movement was harder to animate than skeletons. Harryhausen's most famous creatures, the fighting skeletons, the cyclops, the dinosaurs, all had defined, rigid movements. But the mooncalf required something completely different. A slow, undulating, wave-like motion that suggested weight, muscle, and alien biology. In stop motion, that kind of fluid heaviness is brutal to achieve. Every single frame demanded tiny adjustments across multiple body segments to sell the illusion that the creature wasn't mechanical. Harryhausen had to make it ripple like a living thing, something that moved more like an undersea beast than a land animal. He later said the moon calf's animation was far more difficult than many of his more famous monsters. The effort paid off. On screen, the creature feels massive, strange, and disturbingly organic, a stop-motion achievement that most people never fully appreciated. Number 10. NASA used the film's footage when the real moon landing happened. When Apollo 11 finally touched down on July 20, 1969, NASA faced an unexpected problem. They had no pre-recorded footage showing the lunar module separating from the command module and descending to the surface. The maneuver was happening in real time, broadcast live, but television audiences watching at home had no visual reference for what they were seeing. According to producer Charles Schneer, NASA quietly used clips from first men in the moon on television broadcasts to give viewers a better understanding of what was happening 240,000 miles away. The film's depiction of spacecraft approaching the moon, navigating the low-gravity environment, and touching down on the dusty, cratered surface became a stand-in for reality. News anchors could point to the footage and explain the descent stages. Scientists could reference the visuals when describing orbital mechanics. It's one of the strangest legacies in science fiction history. A whimsical Victorian fantasy with stop-motion monsters quietly helping America and the world understand the greatest technological achievement of the 20th century. The film that flopped in 1964 became educational material in 1969. Number 11. The poster campaign accidentally killed the film's credibility. Ray Harryhausen hated the studio's marketing. Instead of highlighting the film's unique mix of Victorian adventure and space race imagery, Columbia leaned into cartoony alien designs that made the movie look like a Saturday morning matinee for children. The posters were bright, silly, and completely misrepresented the tone. First Men in the Moon was aiming for a broader, more ambitious audience, but the artwork suggested something lightweight and juvenile. Older sci-fi fans saw the posters and assumed it wasn't worth their time. Families expecting a serious space adventure felt misled. The mismatch hurt ticket sales and muddied the film's identity. Harryhausen later called it one of the rare cases where the marketing undercut the movie instead of elevating it. Number 12. A Victorian story crashed into a 1964 space race thriller. The original H.G. Wells novel is a straightforward Edwardian adventure, but the film opens with a twist that wasn't in the book. A modern UN space mission in 1964 discovers a British flag already planted on the moon, dated 1899. That anachronistic framing device was invented entirely for the movie to tap into Cold War space race hysteria. Nations were racing to be first on the moon, and the film cheekily rewrote history by letting Victorian amateurs beat every superpower by more than half a century. The result is a strange double timeline. Sleek astronauts in one scene, then a flashback to Edwardian inventors riding a homemade gravity-defying sphere the next. Two different sci-fi genres colliding in the same script. It shouldn't work, but somehow it gives the story a surreal charm. Number 13. Columbia promoted the film with a $10,000 moon landing contest. In October 1964, Columbia Pictures launched one of the strangest and most ambitious promotional campaigns in science fiction history. They offered $10,000, a massive sum at the time, to any American who could correctly predict the first U.S. astronaut to walk on the moon. Not just the name. Contestants had to guess the exact day, month, and year it would happen. The contest ran nationwide, appearing in newspapers and theater lobbies, turning casual moviegoers into amateur space race prophets, making wild predictions about when humanity would finally reach the lunar surface. Columbia didn't stop there. They built a massive float promoting First Men in the Moon and entered it in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York City, one of the most watched events of the year. After the parade, they toured the float around the greater New York area for weeks, parking it outside theaters and shopping centers. The film opened on over 400 screens during Thanksgiving week, accompanied by a 5-minute featurette called Tomorrow the Moon that contained actual NASA footage and played in 600 theaters nationwide beforehand. It was a full promotional blitz combining spectacle, competition, and real space race excitement. And despite all that money, all that effort, all that visibility, the movie still underperformed at the box office. The marketing was bigger than the film itself. Number 14. Harryhausen planned a full selenite ecosystem that never made it to screen. The moon wasn't supposed to be a barren wasteland. Harryhausen designed an entire living civilization beneath the surface. Towering moon calves that rippled like subterranean beasts, insect-like selenites with their own social hierarchy, and a lost sequence showing selenite scientists being lifted into honeycomb chambers for suspended animation when they weren't needed. Models were built. Animation tests were completed. But once the editors assembled the film, the sequence disrupted the pacing and was cut entirely. Only 3 major creature set pieces survived: the selenite scientists, the moon calf, and the Grand Lunar. Everything else, including transitional animation and world-building details, was trimmed to keep the story moving. What audiences saw was a streamlined version of a much bigger alien world that Harryhausen had spent months crafting. Number 15. The film quietly flopped despite its ambitions. First Men in the Moon didn't land the way Columbia hoped. It wasn't a complete disaster that bankrupted the studio, but it never broke out in the US or Europe, earning far less than Harryhausen's earlier adventure hits like The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad and Jason and the Argonauts. Multiple factors conspired against it. The confused, juvenile marketing alienated older sci-fi fans. The unusual double timeline structure confused audiences expecting a straightforward adventure, and it faced brutal competition from more serious, grounded science fiction films, arriving in the mid-1960s as the space race intensified. People walked into theaters expecting a sweeping, epic lunar adventure in the vein of 2001, a space odyssey. Instead, they got something quirkier, stranger, and harder to categorize. A Victorian comedy adventure with stop-motion bugs that also wanted to be taken seriously as speculative fiction. Harryhausen blamed the excessive comedy, insisting that fantasy film fans were dead serious about these pictures and had no sense of humor. But producer Schneer defended the tone, calling the humor delicious and arguing it was necessary to balance the Victorian period setting and make the film more accessible. The 2 men disagreed publicly about what went wrong. Either way, the film couldn't compete with the zeitgeist. It slipped quietly under the radar during its theatrical run, only finding its devoted cult following years later through television broadcasts and home video releases. Number 16. Bernard Herrmann's absence changed the sound of Harryhausen's films. For years, Bernard Herrmann had been Harryhausen's secret weapon. His dramatic, sweeping scores elevated every creature and every battle. But Herrmann wasn't available for First Men in the Moon, so composer Laurie Johnson stepped in. Johnson's score was competent, even charming in places, but it lacked Herrmann's emotional weight. Fans noticed immediately. The music didn't punch the way it used to. The moon calf's appearance felt less menacing. The selenite encounters lost some of their tension. It was the first crack in a long creative partnership, and it showed. Harryhausen and Herrmann would reunite later. But First Men in the Moon marked the moment when audiences realized how much Herrmann's music had been carrying the magic. Number 17. Harryhausen and Schneer didn't work together again for 5 years. Even though First Men in the Moon carried the familiar Harryhausen-Schneer partnership, the film marked a breaking point. After its release in 1964, the 2 didn't collaborate again until The Valley of Gwangi in 1969. Part of the gap came from shifting studio priorities, part from the film's lukewarm box office, and part from the industry's changing appetite for stop-motion fantasy in an era dominated by realistic space films and gritty dramas. For 2 creators who had been practically inseparable throughout the 1950s and early 60s, the 5-year silence was unusual. First Men in the Moon closed one chapter of their partnership, and when they reunited, the next chapter took them somewhere completely different. From lunar hives to prehistoric deserts. First Men in the Moon is a film that exists in 2 worlds at once, never fully comfortable in either. A Victorian fantasy that helped NASA train astronauts. A box office disappointment that accidentally predicted the future. A comedy that serious sci-fi fans rejected. And a technical marvel hobbled by its own ambitious format. It's too strange to be a straightforward adventure and too sincere to be dismissed as pure parody. The film occupies a peculiar space in cinema history. Harryhausen built an entire alien ecosystem with its own biology and culture. He met with space agencies and absorbed cutting-edge rocket science. He pushed stop-motion into anamorphic widescreen territory for the first time in his career, fighting technical limitations every step of the way. But the film's greatest achievement wasn't the effects, the creatures, or even the meticulous world-building. It was convincing audiences in 1964 that they were seeing the moon before anyone had actually been there. The dust plumes, the sloping terrain, the cautious steps in low gravity, the descent sequence. 5 years later, when Apollo 11 finally landed, and the world watched grainy footage beamed back from another celestial body, people recognized what they were seeing. They'd watched it before in a movie about Victorians in a metal sphere powered by make-believe science. That's The Legacy, a film that flopped commercially but somehow became a cultural time capsule. A fantasy that turned into accidental documentary before the real thing even happened. Harryhausen and Schneer didn't work together again for 5 years after this. The box office disappointment stung. The creative disagreements lingered. But First Men and the Moon survived them both, finding audiences who understood what it was trying to do decades after theaters stopped showing it.